Well, here we are in London, England, about 100 years ago. And this is what they call a bed sitter. The bed we can't actually see since it stands in a recess, shielded by a drawn curtain. The sitter part is the rest of the room, which contains a plain wooden table, a couple of wooden chairs, and a worn-out couch. As for the rest of the furnishings, there's a basin and a cold water tap in one corner. The cooking arrangements consist of a single gas ring perched rather precariously on a washstand. The one bit of comfort is an old-fashioned open coal fire before which young Mr. James Cox is currently warming himself as he combs his hair with one hand while holding a small looking glass in the other.
Mr. Cox, it's me, Mr. Cox.
Come in, Mrs. Bouncer.
Good morning, Mr. Cox. Hope you slept well.
I can't say I did, Mrs. B. I'd be much obliged if you could provide me with a plumper pillow. The one I have seems to have a handful and a half of feathers at each end and nothing whatever in the middle.
Anything to accommodate you, Mr. Cox?
Thank you. Then perhaps you'll be good enough to hold this mirror up while I do my tie-up.
Certainly. Like this? Why, Mr. Cox, I do declare you've had your hair cut.
Cut? I've had it mowed. It was very kind of you to mention it, but I don't need reminding of how absurd I look. Now, where's that hat? Whoops.
Oh, my goodness, Mr. Cox, you can't wear that.
No, I certainly can't. My head's shrunk by at least a size and a half. That's a result of having a haircut. This hat fitted me quite tight before. Luckily, I've got 2 or 3 more. Here you are. What about this one? Oh no, that's worse than the other one. Hold on. This one seems to wobble about rather less than the others.
Very nice, Mr. Cox. Very stylish.
And now I'm off. Oh, by the way, Mrs. Bouncer, I wish to draw your attention to something that's been bothering me for some time. I've noticed that my supply of coal gets used up remarkably fast.
Mr. Cox?
And not only the coal, Mrs. Bouncer. I've recently observed a steady reduction in my supplies of wood, tea, sugar and matches.
Lord, Mr. Cox, you surely don't suspect me.
I don't say I do, Mrs. B. On the other hand, I don't believe it's the cat.
Is there anything else you've got to grumble about, sir?
Grumble? Mrs. Bouncer, do you possess such a thing as a dictionary?
Now, what would I be doing with a dictionary?
Let me lend you mine. Here. Now, if you turn to the letter G... Yes, here we are. Grumble. To complain without cause. Without cause, Mrs. B. Now, that's not my case. And now that we're on the subject, I'd like to know why I frequently find my room full of smoke.
Well, I suppose the chimney?
The chimney doesn't smoke tobacco, Mrs. B. I'm speaking of tobacco smoke. I hope, Mrs. Bouncer, you're not guilty of cheroots or a Cuban cigar.
Oh, Mr. Cox, as if I would.
Not partial to a pipe.
I'm not, sir, as you very well know.
Then how is it that...
Well, I suppose, yes, that must be it.
At the moment, I entirely agree with you, Mrs. B, because I haven't the remotest idea what you mean.
Why, the gentleman who's got the attic is hardly ever without a pipe in his mouth, and there he sits for hours and hours and puffs away into the fireplace.
Ah, then you mean that this gentleman's smoke, instead of emulating all other sorts of smoke and going up the chimney, thinks it proper to take the contrary direction.
Why,
Then I suppose the gentleman you're speaking of is the same individual that I invariably meet coming up the stairs when I'm going down, and going down the stairs when I'm coming up.
why, yes,
From his appearance, I would unhesitatingly put him down as someone connected with the printing trade. His hands are inevitably covered with printer's ink.
you're quite correct, sir. And a very respectable young gentleman he is.
Except that he smokes. Well, I must be off. Good morning to you, Mrs. Bouncer.
You'll be back at your usual time, I suppose, sir?
Yes, about 9 o'clock. You needn't light my fire in future, Mrs. B. I'll do it myself. Don't forget the pillow.
Thank goodness he's gone. I declare I was all of a tremble for fear Mr. Box would come in before Mr. Cox went out. Luckily, they've never met yet. What's more, they're not likely to, for Mr. Box is hard at work at a newspaper office all night and doesn't come home till the morning, and Mr. Cox is busy making hats all day long and doesn't come home till night. So I'm getting double rent for my room, and neither of my lodgers is any the wiser. What a capital idea of mine that was! But I haven't an instant to lose. First of all, let me put Mr. Cox's things out of Mr. Box's way. I really must beg Mr. Box not to smoke so much. I was so dreadfully puzzled as to know what to say when Mr. Cox spoke about it. Now then, to make the bed. And don't let me forget that what's the head of the bed for Mr. Cox becomes the foot of the bed for Mr. Box. People's tastes do differ so. But what's the matter with this pillow, may I ask? The idea of Mr. Cox presuming to complain.
Keep your own side of the staircase, sir. It was as much your fault as mine.
Law, Mr. Box, what is the matter?
Mind your own business, Bouncer.
Dear, Mr. Box, what a temper you're in, to be sure. You're quite pale.
What colour would you have a man be when he's been setting up long leaders for the paper all night?
Oh, but then you'll have all day to yourself.
So I hope. Far be it from me to hurry you, Bouncer, but I intend getting undressed and going to bed.
Oh, of course, Mr. Box. I'm on my way.
Stop! Can you inform me who the individual is that I invariably encounter going downstairs when I'm coming up and coming upstairs when I'm going down?
Oh, yes. That must be the gentleman in the attic, sir.
Really? Well, there's nothing particularly remarkable about him, except his hats. I meet him in all sorts of hats. White hats and black hats, hats with broad brims and hats with narrow brims, Stetsons, fedoras, golfing caps. In short, I have come to the conclusion that he must be professionally associated with the hatting trade.
He is indeed, sir. And by the way, Mr. Box, he begged me to ask you, as a particular favour, not to smoke quite so much.
Did he just? Then you may tell my Lord Hatter, with my compliments, that if he objects to the smell of tobacco, he'd better remove himself to some adjoining parish.
Oh, Mr. Box, you surely wouldn't deprive me of a lodger.
It would come to precisely the same thing, Bouncer, because at the slightest attempt to put my pipe out, I'll give you warning that I shall give you warning.
Fair warning, Mr. Box. Now, do you want anything more of me?
On the contrary, I've had quite enough of you.
Well, I never. Goodbye, Mr. Box.
Quite extraordinary. The trouble I always have to get rid of that woman. She knows I'm up all night, yet she seems determined to stop me sleeping by day. Now, let me see. Shall I take my nap before I swallow my breakfast, or shall I take my breakfast before I swallow my nap? I mean, no, never mind. I've got a rasher of bacon in one of my pockets somewhere. Here it is, and a bread roll. The next thing is to light the gas ring. Where are my matches? Now, this is too bad of Bouncer. I had a whole box full 3 days ago, and now there's only one match left. I'm perfectly aware that she makes free with my coal and my sugar and my tea, but I did think my matches would be sacred. I'd better use the last one to light the gas ring. Oh, and blow me down if she hasn't been using my frying pan as well. The last thing I cooked on it was a pork chop, and now it smells strongly of herring. Well, the bacon will soon overcome that. Oh, I can scarcely keep my eyes open. Tell you what, I'll just lie down for a bit while the bacon fries itself. Oh.
Wonders will never cease. I was 11 minutes late this morning, and I was sneaking into the shop when my venerable employer, with his benevolent smile on his aged face, says, "Cox, I shan't want you today. You can have the day off." Heaven knows what I'll do, but I must have my breakfast first. That'll give me time to reflect. I've bought a mutton chop, so I shan't want any dinner. Good gracious, I forgot the bread. Hello, what's this? A roll? I do declare that's lucky. Now then, to light the gas ring. That's my box of matches. Who's dared touch them? Why, it's empty. I left one in it, I'd swear to it. Goodness gracious, the gas ring is alight. And the frying pan is on. And what's that on the frying pan? Bacon? Bacon it is. Well, upon my life, Mrs. Bouncer has a nerve. She takes my last match to my frying pan to cook her breakfast. No, I won't put up with this. Out of the pan with you. In you go, mutton chop. Now then, to tackle Mrs. Bouncer. I won't have it. I really won't.
Come in if it's you, Mrs. Bouncer. I wonder how long I've been asleep. Goodness gracious, my bacon. Hello, what's this? A chop. Whose chop? Mrs. Bouncer's, I'll be bound. She thought she'd cook her breakfast while I was asleep with my frying pan too. But where's my bacon? Here it is. Well, this time Bouncer's gone too far. You'll never see this chop again. Out of the window with it. Let's give the cats of the neighbourhood a treat. So much for Bouncer's breakfast. Now for my own. And now to tackle the Bouncer.
Who are you, sir?
Come to that, who are you?
What are you doing here?
Come to that, what are you doing here?
Go to your attic, sir.
My attic, sir. Your attic, sir.
Printer, I shall do you a frightful injury if you don't instantly leave my apartment.
Your apartment? You mean my apartment, you contemptible hatter, you?
Your apartment? I like that. Look here, sir. Mrs. Bouncer's receipt for the last week's rent, sir.
Ditto, sir. Mrs. Bouncer! Mrs.
Bouncer!
Bouncer!
What's the matter? Oh my goodness. Mr. Cox and Mr. Box. May I introduce you?
Certainly not. Remove that hatter instantly.
I have no wish to be acquainted with that printer. Turn him out immediately.
Well, gentlemen, I would, but it's not as simple as it may appear.
Madam, explain yourself.
Yes, I demand an explanation. Whose room is this?
Come on, Bouncer, speak up. You let this apartment to me, didn't you?
Nonsense. I'm your tenant, aren't I?
No,
There. You heard that, sir? The room belongs to me.
not exactly.
Not exactly. What do you mean, woman?
Well, it sort of belongs to both of you.
Both of us?
Oh, dear gentlemen, don't be angry. But you see, Mr. Box only being at home in the daytime and Mr. Cox at night, I thought I might venture until my little back second floor room was ready.
And
And when will it be ready?
Tomorrow.
I'll take it.
So will I.
Excuse me, but if you both take it, you may as well stop where you are.
True.
I spoke first, sir.
Yeah, then you may have it, Mr. Cox. The little back second floor room is yours. Now, sir, please go away.
Go away? I should do no such thing.
Don't quarrel, gentlemen, please. I'll get the other room ready at once. Now do keep your tempers.
I'm quite worn out. I need my sleep. I think I'll go to bed.
I beg your pardon. I cannot allow anyone to rumple my bed.
Your bed? It's my bed, and I've been working all night. You may retire to your bed in the little back second floor as soon as it's ready.
Look, we may be doomed to share the same room for a few hours longer, but I don't see any need to lose our tempers. After all, I've no violent animosity to you, sir.
Nor have I any rooted antipathy to you. Besides, it was all Mrs. Bouncer's fault.
Entirely. Why don't we sit down, Mr. Box?
Very well, Mr. Cox. After you.
Can this couch bear the weight of both of us?
Let's test it. Have you visited the music hall recently, Mr. Cox?
No, sir. My intended, that is my future wife, doesn't approve.
Ah, so you're to be married. I congratulate you. My hand, sir.
Thank you. There's no need to get up. She won't be coming here.
Oh, I understand. You've got a snug little establishment somewhere else on the sly. Cunning dog.
No such thing, sir. But my intended wife happens to own a small hotel by the seaside.
Really? Where?
And during the holiday season, which fortunately is rather long, we see little of each other. But as the season is nearly over, I fully expect to be blessed with the sight of my beloved before too long. Are you married, Mr. Box?
Me? Not exactly.
Ah, a happy bachelor.
Not precisely.
Oh, a widower? My condolences, sir.
Not exactly a widower either. Not absolutely.
But you are not by any sad chance divorced?
Divorced? Certainly not, sir.
You'll excuse me, Mr. Box, but I don't exactly understand how you can help being one of them. Every man alive must be either married or unmarried, or if not, the surviving partner of a previous marriage.
That may well be the case, but you see, I'm not alive.
Sir, you are talking in riddles. You're alive as I am.
No, I'm perfectly serious. I've been dead for the last 3 years.
What utter poppycock!
If you won't believe me, I'll refer you to a very large and respectable circle of disconsolate friends.
My dear Mr. Box, if a man on the eve of committing matrimony could indeed leave this world and yet stop in it, I should be very pleased to know how. Very pleased.
Oh, then I gather you're not frantically attached to your intended.
Not exactly. Yet. At present, I'm aware only of one obstacle to doting on her.
And what is that?
I can't abide her.
Oh, then there's nothing easier. Do as I did.
I will. What was it?
Drown yourself.
I don't quite...
Listen to me. 3 years ago, it was my misfortune to engage the affections of a blooming, though somewhat middle-aged, widow at a certain seaside resort.
Oh, how strange. Just my case. 3 months ago.
Well, her attentions became so embarrassing that I seriously considered enlisting in the Guards.
So did I. How very odd.
But they wouldn't have me. They actually had the effrontery to say that I was too short.
I wasn't tall enough either.
So I had to content myself with a marching regiment. I signed up.
So did I. What a coincidence.
I'd no sooner done so than I was sorry for it.
So was I.
My infatuated widow offered to buy my discharge on condition that I'd lead her to the altar.
My case exactly.
I hesitated, but at last I agreed.
I consented at once.
Well, Mr. Cox, the day fixed for the happy ceremony at length drew near. In fact, too near to be pleasant. So I suddenly discovered that I wasn't worthy to possess her. When I told her so, instead of being flattered by the compliment, she flew on me like a tiger. I fought back. Suddenly, something whizzed past me within an inch of my ear and smashed into pieces against the mantelpiece. It was the slop basin. I retaliated with a teacup. We parted, and the next morning I was served with a notice for breach of promise.
What happened?
I faced ruin. So I left my home early one morning with one suit of clothes on my back and another tied up in a bundle under my arm. I arrived on the cliffs. I opened my bundle, deposited the suit of clothes on the very edge of the precipice, took one look into the yawning gulf beneath me, and walked off in the opposite direction.
So you disappeared. The suit of clothes was found?
Exactly. And in a jacket pocket was found a piece of paper with these affecting farewell words. This is your work, Penelope Ann.
Penelope Ann? Did you say Penelope Ann?
Penelope Ann.
Originally widow of William Wiggins?
Indeed. How did you...
Then you must be the late lamented long-lost Box.
I am.
What a coincidence! And I was about to marry the interesting creature you so cruelly deceived.
Congratulations. I give you joy. And now I think I'll go and take a stroll.
No, you don't. Or I'll not lose sight of you till I've restored you to the arms of your intended.
My intended? You mean your intended?
No, sir, yours.
How can she be my intended, now that I'm drowned?
You're no such thing. And you proposed to her first.
What of that? I came to an untimely end, and you popped the question afterwards.
You are much more worthy of her than I am. I give her up to you. My generosity knows no bounds.
I wouldn't rob you for the world. Good morning, sir.
Stop!
Let go of me, Hatter, or you'll regret it.
Who to that?
An insult, under my very nose. I demand satisfaction, sir. Mrs. Bouncer!
Mrs.
Mrs.
Bouncer!
Bouncer!
Good gracious me! What to do? What is it, gentlemen?
Pistols for two.
Yes, sir. At once, sir.
You don't mean to say you keep loaded firearms in the house?
Oh, no, Mr. Cox, they're not loaded.
Then produce the murderous weapons instantly.
I won't be a minute.
What's your opinion of duelling, Mr. Cox?
I think it's a barbarous practice.
So do I, sir. To be sure, I don't so much object to it when the pistols are not loaded.
No, I dare say that does make a difference.
And yet, on the other hand, doesn't it strike you as rather a waste of time for two people to fire pistols at each other with nothing in them?
No, sir. No more than any other harmless recreation.
Tell me, why do you object to marrying Penelope Ann?
Well, because, as I've observed already, I can't abide her. You'll be happy with her.
Happy? Me? Knowing that I've deprived you of such a treasure? No, no, Cox, I won't have her.
Nor will I.
Here's an idea. Suppose we draw lots for the lady.
Fair enough, Mr. Box.
Or what do you say to dice?
Dice by all means.
That's lucky. Mrs. Bouncer's nephew left his pair here yesterday. We sometimes throw for a trifle, and he always throws sixes. I know those dice are loaded. They're over here. Here we are.
I've no objection at all to dice. I lost £1 17 shillings and sixpence last Barnet races to a very gentlemanly-looking man who had the most peculiar knack of throwing sixes. I suspected they were loaded, so I gave him another £half-crown, and he gave me the dice.
Now then, sir, here are my dice. Where are yours?
I have them here. Let's sit at the table. Will you lead off?
As you please. The lowest throw, of course, wins Penelope Ann.
Of course.
Sixes.
Well thrown, sir. Let's see what I can do. Sixes.
That's a pretty good throw of yours. Sixes.
Sixes.
Those aren't bad dice of yours, Mr. Cox.
Yours seem pretty good ones, Mr. Box.
Suppose we change?
Very well. Here you are. Many thanks. You may start.
Sixes.
Sixes.
This is perfectly absurd. Let's try something else. I have it. Suppose we toss for Penelope Ann.
The very thing I was going to suggest.
Now, where's on earth's my tossing shilling? Here it is.
Where's that lucky sixpence of mine? I've got it.
Now then, sir, heads win?
Or tails lose, whichever you prefer.
It's the same to me, sir. Then heads I win. Here goes. Heads.
I'll toss now, if you don't mind. Heads I win. Heads.
My turn. Heads.
Now me. Heads.
Stop. Allow me to examine that coin of yours. As I suspected, your sixpence has got no tail, sir.
Just a moment. Let me see your coin. Your shilling, sir, has got two heads.
Cheat.
Swindler.
Gentlemen, I'm afraid I can't find the pistols, but I bought you a letter. It came by last post yesterday. I'm sure I don't know how I forgot it, for I put it carefully in my pocket. Here it is, Mr. Cox. Now, I simply must go and finish that room in the attic.
The postmark decidedly says Southend-on-Sea.
Ah, a tender epistle from Penelope Ann, no doubt.
Then you'd better read it, sir. Here.
Me, sir?
Of course, you don't suppose I'm going to read a letter from your intended.
My intended? Look, it's addressed to you. C-O-X.
You call that a C? I'd say it's most definitely a B.
Utter nonsense. Open it.
Goodness gracious.
Here, let me see. Gracious goodness.
Give it here. Southend-on-Sea, May the 4th. Sir, I am sorry to have to inform you that yesterday, May the 3rd, your intended wife suffered a fatal accident. He means your intended.
No, yours. However, it's of no consequence now, but she's unquestionably was yours. Go on.
Poor Mrs. Wiggins went out for a short excursion in a sailing boat. A sudden and violent squall soon took place, which, it is supposed, upset her, as she was found 2 days later keel upwards.
Poor woman.
The boat, sir, not Mrs. Wiggins. As her business agent, I proceeded to examine her papers, amongst which I soon discovered her will, the following extract from which will, I have no doubt, be satisfactory to you. I hereby bequeath my entire property to you, my intended husband. And to think that I tossed for such a woman.
Or that I staked such a treasure on the hazard of a dice.
Mr. Box, I can't sufficiently thank you for your sympathy.
I'm sure, Mr. Cox, you couldn't feel her loss more if she'd been your own intended.
If she'd been my own intended, she was my own intended.
Your intended? I like that. Haven't you just been insisting that this letter was addressed to me? And did you not remark, quite correctly, that I proposed to her first?
To which you very sensibly replied that you'd come to an untimely end.
I deny it. The fortune's mine.
Fine,
I'll go to law.
so will I.
Stop. A thought strikes me. Instead of going to law about the property, suppose we divide it?
Equally?
Equally. I'll take 2/3.
That's fair enough, I'll take 3/4.
That won't do. Half and half?
Agreed. There's my hand on it.
And mine.
Hello? Did you hear that? It's the postman again.
Postman yesterday, postman today.
Another letter, Mr. Cox.
Another trifle from Southend-on-Sea. Goodness gracious.
Let me see that. Gracious goodness.
Give that back. Happy to inform you. False alarm.
Sudden squall, boat upset, Mrs. Wiggins your intended,
Picked up by a steamboat.
carried into Boulogne,
Returned here this morning.
will start by early train tomorrow.
And be with you at 10 o'clock exact.
Cox, I congratulate you.
Box, I give you joy.
I'm sorry that most important business of the Colonial Office will prevent my witnessing your truly happy meeting between you and your intended. Good morning to you, sir.
Oh no, Box, you're not the one to leave. It's obviously up to me to do so. Not for worlds would I disturb the rapturous meeting between you and your intended. Good morning to you, sir.
You'll excuse me, but our last arrangement was that she was your intended.
No, yours.
Yours!
Oh my goodness, 10 o'clock.
Do you hear that? A cab stopping at the door. No, it's an omnibus.
Let me see. A lady's getting out.
There's no mistaking that majestic person. It's Penelope Ann.
Your intended.
Yours.
Yours.
Listen, she's coming up the stairs.
Shut the door.
Mr. Cox! Mr. Cox!
I've just stepped out.
So have I.
Mr. Cox, open the door. It's only me, Mrs. Bouncer.
Only you? Where's the lady?
Gone.
On your honour?
That's a gentleman.
Yes. And she's left a note for Mr. Cox.
Give it to me.
Then open this door.
Slide it under. Goodness gracious.
Let me see that. Gracious goodness.
Dear Mr. Cox, pardon my candour.
But being convinced that our feelings, like our ages, are not in tune,
I hasten to inform you that I am about to be married.
to Mr. Knox.
Hooray!
3 cheers for Mr. Knox. Hooray, hooray, hooray.
The little second floor back room is ready.
But I don't want it.
No more do I. After all, Why should we be parted?
Why should we be torn asunder?
Cox, you'll excuse the apparent insanity of the remark, but the more I look at you, the more certain I am that you're my long-lost brother.
Do you know that's exactly what I was about to say to you?
Tell me, for heaven's sake tell me, do you have such a thing as a strawberry mark on your left arm?
No.
Ah, then you are. You are indeed my long-lost brother.
And you're mine. And of course, we stop where we are.
Of course.
Oh, gentlemen, what wonderful news! Then I shall let my little second floor back room to someone else.
You do that, Mrs. Bouncer, and make your fortune. Between you and me, I'm rather partial to this apartment.
So am I. I feel quite at home here.
Everything's so clean and comfortable.
And I'm sure the mistress of the house, from what I've seen of her, is very anxious to please.
Indeed I am.
I knew it. I vote, Box, that we stick by her and continue to share this excellent room.
Agreed. There's my hand upon it. Then Box
And Cox are
both highly satisfied.
The Milborne Players audio production of Box and Cox was written by J M Morton and dramatised for radio by Neville Taylor. Cast in order of appearance. Narrator was Dorothy Carley. Mrs. Bouncer was played by Jill Ireland. James Cox was played by Steve Bewers. John Box was played by Gwen E. Davis. Recorded, compiled and edited by Ian Carley and directed by Andy Coetzee.